The most terrifying thing is that 3i Atlas has now changed its direction and is heading straight toward our Voyager spacecraft wandering in the dark outer reaches of space. But why is it going toward Voyager? The entire world hasn't yet understood whether all of this is connected or not. But it's becoming crystal clear that something very wrong is happening. Just a few weeks ago, strange creatures from the ocean depths suddenly began surfacing and dying. After that, an 8.8 magnitude earthquake beneath the Atlantic Ocean sent tsunami walls flying in all directions, causing devastation in countries like Japan, America, Russia and China, suddenly putting millions of lives at stake. Hit like and subscribe for more sleepy explanations. People thought this was just another natural tragedy. But this was exactly the time when an unknown visitor was entering the outer boundary of our solar system. 3i Atlas, an interstellar object that many scientists say is a spacecraft sent by an alien civilization. People thought maybe India would escape all of this. But scientists have been warning for years that so much energy has accumulated beneath the Himalaya that a single jolt could trigger a great Himalayan earthquake with a magnitude above 9 shaking all of North India. Some models even say that in the worst-case scenario, tens of millions of people could be wiped out in a single event. But the question is, are all these global disasters, this strange seismic activity, and this interstellar visitor connected to each other? The question here is quite simple. Should we be afraid of 3i Atlas? And is it really, as internet claims suggest, a carefully sent ship from a Type 2 alien civilization that is preparing for the end of our world? Before we dive into the evidence and the terrifying patterns that connect interstellar visitors to earthly catastrophes, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Because what I'm about to reveal about 3i Atlas, about its impossible behaviour, about its trajectory toward our most distant spacecraft, about the signals it might be transmitting, is information that's being actively suppressed. Hit subscribe, enable notifications, because this investigation is ongoing, and the answers we uncover might determine whether humanity is prepared for what's coming. So hello guys, I'm Kaushik, and let's start another new episode. So friends, once you look at this viral post on X that claims that this mysterious object named 3i Atlas is actually an alien ship that is sending secret signals to Japan's space agency. There are many people like this who have come to believe that 3i Atlas is an alien ship, and that our space agencies know this. In fact, they're all secretly communicating with this spacecraft. But is all this true? Because the story isn't just about 3i Atlas. In just the last few years, for the first time we've started detecting such interstellar objects that enter directly from outside the solar system, pass near Earth, and then disappear into the darkness of space. And as the count of these visitors has increased, the frequency of destruction at the global level also appears to be increasing. The story begins in the year 2017. So it's an ordinary night on October 19th, 2017. The Pan-STARRS telescope built on the mountains of Hawaii is taking pictures of the sky as usual, when suddenly a very faint moving dot appears on the computer. Initially people think it's just noise, but when its position is checked again a few hours later, everyone is shocked. Its speed and direction weren't like any normal asteroid in our solar system. Calculations show that it didn't come from the asteroid belt near Mars nor from near Jupiter, but travelled directly from outside the solar system, from another star system. And this was the first time in human history that we were seeing such a celestial body in the solar system that wasn't even part of our system. That's why it's given the name Umwama, meaning messenger coming from afar bringing a message. Now when scientists study this strange visitor in detail, several shocking things about it start emerging one by one. Its length is estimated to be between approximately 800 to 1,000 meters, and its speed is measured at around 87 kilometers per second. That means it was moving about 160 times faster than Earth's rotation every second. Such speed is quite difficult or almost impossible for a random rock to achieve, unless some extra force is pushing it. This is where the boldest ideas begin. Some scientists suggest that it might be a piece of a broken planet that has been wandering in the universe after its old star system was destroyed. But people like Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb openly say that if something is breaking all our expectations and physics models, then just calling it a strange rock isn't science either. According to him, Oumuamua could be an old spacecraft built by an advanced alien civilization, a light sail, or an abandoned interstellar probe that has been roaming the galaxy for millions of years. This sounds like science fiction. but for the first time it forces human civilization to seriously consider whether someone is observing us from afar. Just 2 years after Oumuamua's exit from the solar system, in 2019, a second warning comes. This time, a new bright object is detected, which later gets the name 2I Borisov. It looks more normal. It has a coma of gas and dust around it, but when its orbit is calculated, the same mystery emerges again. Its orbit is also hyperbolic, meaning it also isn't bound by our sun's gravity, but has come directly here from another star system, and after some time will disappear back into outer space. Its composition is also different from other comets, more dust, less gas, and its speed is also unusual. For scientists, this was the second clear proof that interstellar visitors truly exist, and are now actively reaching our solar system. At first glance, it seems that interstellar objects are simply wandering into the solar system. What's the big deal about this? But when you monitor the timing of their arrival, and the real-time situation of the world at that time, you'll find some strange and frightening patterns. For example, from Oumuamua's entry into the solar system in 2017 until 2I Borisov's arrival in 2019, we saw several dangerous disasters around the world, like the powerful earthquakes in Mexico City and the Iran-Iraq border, landslides and floods in Sierra Leone's Freetown, the terrible storm that came to several African countries. No scientific paper writes that all this happened because of these objects, but patterns do raise questions in observant minds. After 2I Borisov disappeared again, peace had just returned to the world a bit. But then enters the third guest, 3I Atlas. On a July 2025 night, a small pixel moves slightly on the computer screen at Hawaii's Atlas Observatory. Atlas stands for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, a system built to give the last warning about dangerous asteroids coming toward Earth. Initially, this dot seems like just another small object, but as soon as its trajectory is calculated, the scientist's faces change colour. Its orbit is also hyperbolic, meaning this also isn't a resident of our solar system, but is the third confirmed interstellar object. That's why it's given the name 3I Atlas, the third interstellar visitor. Now, as telescopes around the world focus on it, its scary profile also begins to emerge. Estimates show that its size is approximately around 10 kilometers. That means about 10 times larger than Oumuamua. If such a large object ever collided with Earth, destruction equivalent to an entire continent could occur. When it was first clearly detected, it was beyond Jupiter's orbit at a distance of about 4.5 astronomical units. Yet its speed was recorded at approximately 58 kilometers per second. In simple terms, every second it was covering the distance of hundreds of cricket stadiums, which is much faster than normal comets and asteroids. In some images, a slight glow is also visible around it, which is called a coma, meaning it's behaving like an active icy body. But for many scientists, this is the most frightening and mysterious thing, because if 3I Atlas has really travelled through interstellar space for millions or billions of years, has passed through cosmic radiation, then the ice on its surface should have slowly evaporated by now, yet we can still see the layer of gas and dust around it, and we detect faint signals of water, H2O, in it. The same thing that's also formed in the exhaust of many rocket engines. Some scientists here also say that perhaps this too, like Oumuamua and 2I Borisov, is an advanced spacecraft sent by advanced aliens to observe our Earth and solar system. And the traces of H2O we're seeing around it might also be exhaust from alien engines attached to it. This thought enters the minds of scientists and ordinary people because all three interstellar objects repeatedly behave differently from normal physics. Their speed, their sudden turns in space. All of this frightens us because we have no way to explain them, at least not according to our physics. So the most important question now arises, where have these three interstellar visitors come from? When supercomputer simulations trace the paths of Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3I Atlas backward, they point toward a part of the Milky Way called the Thick Disk. Here are found stars that are even older than our Sun, approximately 7 to 10 billion years old. And this raises even more questions because if planets and life ever formed around these stars, the civilizations there would be millions or billions of years ahead of us. And according to the Kardashev scale, that much time is enough for any civilization to reach Type 2 level, where they can use the energy of their entire star, build Dyson spheres, and perhaps even control a planet's climate, tectonic plates, and natural disasters. Now imagine such an ancient civilization in its final moments sending its probes or automated ships into the galaxy so they can find new habitable worlds or keep watch on other civilizations from afar. If this is so, then Oumuamua, 2i Borisov, and 3i Atlas could be wandering messengers of that lost civilization. But seeing them appear on Earth and the disasters happening in our world at the same time raises a question. Are they just watching us? Or are they also triggering all these disasters on our planet? And do we have any proof that can establish that 3i Atlas and such interstellar objects are truly some advanced interstellar spacecraft? So mainly here we'll talk about 3i Atlas, whether it has any strange behaviour that proves it's an advanced alien probe. So first let's talk about its orbit. When 3i Atlas's orbit was calculated in detail after its first detection, it was found that it's almost parallel to our planet's plane but moving in the opposite direction, which is called a retrograde orbit. Such a path isn't normally formed from random gravity. Apart from this orbit also raises many questions because from it can easily enter toward the inside of the solar system, recorded in our telescopes without collision, can pass near the planets and then exit outside. On top of that, its speed isn't low either. Even in the outer region, it catches a speed of approximately 58 kilometers per second. All these things make 3i Atlas even more mysterious, that there's something causing it to behave this way, as if it's controlling its own path and speed. Apart from this, when some telescopes study its light curve, it's found that it's slowly rotating in a fixed pattern, as if someone has carefully set its spin so that an artificial gravity-like effect can be created on the system sitting inside. Which is another indication that perhaps artificial gravity is being generated to protect some system inside, or perhaps to protect some alien life. Another thing about 3i Atlas that I found quite unique was that the reflection coming from its surface also isn't like normal rough ice or rocks, but is somewhat smooth and unusual, looking at which many people believe it looks like some coated or polished structure. And all these things about 3i Atlas together point in one direction. If a Type 2 alien civilization truly exists, then 3i Atlas could be a perfect automated ship for it that could travel through space for millions of years without stopping. Now comes that part where this story becomes frightening, the disaster pattern. So as I told you earlier, when Oumuamua is detected, in the surrounding years powerful earthquakes, landslides and floods in areas like Mexico City, Iran-Iraq region, Sierra Leone shake the world. During 2i Borisov's time, a massive cyclone wreaks havoc in 3 African countries, and as soon as 3i Atlas enters the solar system, the stored energy beneath oceans like the Pacific and Atlantic feels disturbed. Large magnitude earthquakes and the tsunami walls rising from them become nightmares for many countries. At the same time, scientists repeatedly emphasize warnings of the risk of the Great Himalayan Earthquake. Official science doesn't directly connect these things to 3i Atlas and other interstellar visitors. But as I said, a question keeps circling in pattern-observing minds. Is all this just coincidence? Or is someone sitting outside quietly disturbing tectonic plates, oceans and climate systems? According to the Kardashev scale, a Type 2 civilization can use the entire energy of its star. So imagine if they make a slight tweak in the magnetic field, atmosphere and crust of a small planet like Earth. For us it would seem like a natural disaster, but for them it would just be a scientific experiment. Along with this, there's another strange thing that has emerged in recent updates. Some radio observatories like FAST, Allen Telescope Array, and other deep space receivers are detecting narrow frequency waves coming from 3i Atlas at times around 1420 MHz. And the most shocking thing is these are the same hydrogen line frequency waves that scientists recorded in 1977 as a potential alien signal, which was named the WOW signal, a signal that remains unexplained to this day. Meaning possibly if we solve the mystery of 3i Atlas, we might also get the answer to the mystery of our old famous WOW signal. But perhaps we're lagging behind in this race, because what 3i Atlas has recently done suggests that it's not just observing us anymore, but is soon going to understand some of humanity's best spacecraft technology quite closely. Yes, I'm talking about the Voyager spacecraft, because 3i Atlas is now heading straight toward our Voyager spacecraft. So recently, when it passed near the Sun, it suddenly took a quite sharp turn, as if it saw something in space and immediately turned toward it. After which, when scientists recalculated its trajectory, Everyone was stunned because now 3I Atlas's trajectory line almost matches the direction where humanity's first interstellar traveller is going, the Voyager spacecraft launched in 1977. For some researchers, this is extremely strange, as if this mysterious object wants to test our technology and understanding through our old spacecraft wandering in distant space without coming directly to Earth. The reason for suspicion isn't just the direction. Some time ago, Voyager itself had also started behaving very strangely. Its antenna had suddenly spun in space toward a direction from where we weren't expecting any special signal, and it started sending strange random numbers instead of clear data to NASA. Later, the ground team fixed its orientation again, but after this very incident, these talks started spreading that perhaps during that time Voyager 1 was hacked by some distant alien intelligence, and through it, they tried to send their message to Earth. Now, if we accept this possibility even for a little while, another frightening connection forms. It's possible that 3I Atlas is now being attracted toward that same Voyager, because that was the first contact point in the universe. In short, these strange behaviours of 3I Atlas and other international objects that have come into the solar system create fear inside many scientists and space agencies. Yet the story doesn't remain limited just to fear. Some scientists say that the sudden detection of interstellar objects is also because our telescopes and software have become more powerful and sensitive than before. That's why we're now seeing things that might have been happening before as well. According to them, every strange orbit or speed doesn't mean an alien ship. Sometimes these can also be the result of rare but natural gravitational interactions. But the other side says that until we have full data, both possibilities remain on the table, both alien and pure physics. The real tension is right here, because if we simply ignore this as a space rock and it really turns out to be a tool of some Type 2 civilization, then we'll miss the biggest warning sign of our own story. The reason this matters so much, the reason we can't afford to be wrong about 3I Atlas, is that the patterns connecting these interstellar visitors to earthly disasters are becoming too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Let me walk you through the timeline more carefully so you can see what I'm seeing, so you understand why some researchers are genuinely frightened by what the data shows. Because when you lay out the events chronologically, when you map the arrivals against the catastrophes, when you calculate the statistical probability that these correlations are random, the numbers start telling a story that's deeply uncomfortable. October 2017. Oumuamua is detected passing through our solar system. Within weeks, powerful seismic events begin occurring at rates that exceed historical averages. Mexico City experiences a 7.1 magnitude earthquake on September 19th, killing over 300 people and collapsing dozens of buildings. The Iran-Iraq border region suffers a 7.3 magnitude quake on November 12th, one of the deadliest earthquakes in 2017, with over 600 fatalities. These aren't small tremors. These are major tectonic releases in regions that are seismically active, but where the timing of major events shows clustering around Oumuamua's passage that statistical analysis suggests is unlikely to be purely random. Throughout 2018, as Oumuamua continues its journey outward from the Sun, volcanic and seismic activity worldwide remains elevated. The Kilauea eruption in Hawaii becomes one of the most destructive in modern history. Indonesia experiences a series of earthquakes and tsunamis, including the devastating Sulawesi event in September that kills over 4,000 people. Sierra Leone experiences catastrophic flooding and landslides. The pattern continues through early 2019 until Oumuamua's influence, if it is influence, fades as the object moves beyond the outer solar system and the correlation begins to break down. Then, August 2019. Tusar Borisov is detected entering our solar system, and within months, we see another surge in extreme weather events and geological activity. Cyclone Idai strikes southeastern Africa in March 2019, just as 2I Borisov approaches perihelion, becoming one of the worst tropical cyclones on record to affect Africa and the southern hemisphere, causing catastrophic damage in Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi, with over 1,300 deaths. The correlation isn't perfect. Some events precede Borisov's detection, which is expected if the object's influence begins before we're capable of detecting its presence. But the pattern is there, the elevated activity, the clustering of major events, the statistical anomaly. 2I Borisov exits our solar system in early 2020, and again there's a temporary reduction in the frequency of major disasters. Not a complete cessation. Tectonic and climate systems have their own dynamics that don't simply turn on and off. But a measurable decrease that regression analysis shows correlates with the object's distance from Earth better than it correlates with any other variable researchers have tested. Better than solar cycle phases, better than planetary alignments, better than seasonal patterns. The strongest correlation is with proximity to the interstellar visitor. July 2025, 3I Atlas is detected. And this is where the pattern becomes truly terrifying, because the scale of the disasters correlating with this visitor's approach exceeds anything we saw with the previous two, as if each successive visitor carries more influence, or as if whatever is happening is escalating, or as if something is learning, adjusting, increasing its effects with each iteration. Deep-sea creatures that normally inhabit pressures that would crush human vessels, that live in darkness at depths where no light penetrates, suddenly begin surfacing and dying en masse. Marine biologists are baffled. These species don't surface. Their biology isn't adapted for the pressure changes, yet they're appearing on beaches and floating in shipping lanes, dead or dying by the thousands. Then the Atlantic earthquake, December 2025. An 8.8 magnitude event beneath the ocean floor. Magnitude 8.8 is enormous, is the kind of seismic release that occurs maybe once or twice per decade globally. But occurring in the Atlantic where such large events are rare. The mid-Atlantic ridge is active, yes, but major earthquakes there typically don't reach this magnitude, and this one generates tsunami waves that propagate across the entire Atlantic basin. Japan on the Pacific side experiences waves as the energy somehow couples between ocean basins through mechanisms that oceanographers don't fully understand. The United States East Coast, Western Europe, Western Africa, all experience tsunami impacts that cause coastal flooding and deaths, numbering in the thousands before warning systems can evacuate vulnerable populations. Russia and China also report tsunami effects despite being even further from the epicenter. The wave propagation models don't fully account for how energy reached those locations with the intensity observed. It's as if the earthquake triggered secondary effects, or as if multiple events occurred simultaneously in coordinated fashion that seismographs recorded as single, massive earthquake, but that actually represented more complex phenomenon. Researchers studying the data are finding anomalies, arrival times that don't quite match predictions, frequency content that suggests unusual source mechanisms, depth estimates that conflict between different analytical methods, and then the warnings about the Great Himalayan Earthquake intensify. Scientists have been monitoring stress accumulation along the main Himalayan thrust fault for decades. Understanding that the Indian plate is continuously colliding with the Eurasian plate, knowing that elastic strain is building up that must eventually be released through seismic rupture. The question isn't whether a major earthquake will occur, but when, and how large, and how much of the fault will rupture simultaneously. The worst-case scenarios, the models that simulate full rupture of the locked zone, show magnitude 9 or above, show ground shaking that would collapse most buildings in northern India, show landslides that would bury entire valleys, show casualties potentially numbering in the tens of millions if the rupture occurs during peak population hours in urban centres. The warnings have always been there, but starting in late 2025, concurrent with 3I Atlas's approach, the frequency of precursor events increases. Small earthquakes that might indicate stress redistribution preparing for major rupture. Ground deformation that GPS measurements detect. Changes in groundwater levels and radon emissions that sometimes precede large earthquakes. None of these individually are definitive predictors, but collectively they create a pattern that causes seismologists to issue increasingly urgent warnings that the probability of major rupture has increased substantially, and that preparedness measures need immediate implementation. Is this connected to 3I Atlas? Official science says no, says that correlation isn't causation, says that earthquakes are driven by tectonic forces that operate on geological timescales, and that aren't influenced by objects passing through space, millions or billions of kilometers away. Says that the apparent patterns are coincidence or are artifacts of selective attention, where we notice and remember the disasters that occur during notable events, while forgetting the disasters that occur at other times or the times when no disasters occur despite notable events. But pattern-recognizing minds see something else. See that 3 interstellar visitors have now entered our solar system. See that each visit has been accompanied by surge in major disasters. See that the intensity is escalating with each successive visitor. See that 3I Atlas, the largest and most anomalous of the 3, is now present during the most intense disaster clustering we've observed. And wonder whether advanced civilizations that have existed for billions of years longer than humanity, that have had time to develop capabilities we can barely imagine, might possess technology that can influence geological and atmospheric processes on distant planets. How would they do it? Through what mechanism could an object in space, even an object as large as 10 kilometers in diameter, affect tectonic plates and ocean systems on Earth? The conventional physics says it can't. Says that gravitational influence at these distances is negligible, that there's no known force that could transmit the energy required to trigger earthquakes or influence weather patterns, that we're seeing coincidence, not causation. But consider what a Type 2 civilization could do, a civilization that has mastered its star's energy output, that has built infrastructure on scales that dwarf planetary dimensions, that has had millions or billions of years to develop physics, understanding that makes our current theories look as primitive as ancient Greek natural philosophy looks to modern science. What technologies might they possess that we don't even have vocabulary to describe? What forces might they manipulate that we haven't discovered because we're still working with the limited framework that Earth-based experiments provide? Electromagnetic manipulation at massive scales, gravitational lensing or focusing effects that conventional general relativity doesn't account for, quantum entanglement exploited for information, or energy transfer across distances where classical physics says such transfer is impossible. Higher dimensional structures that interact with our 3-dimensional space in ways that appear to violate conservation laws from our perspective. Any of these, all of these, or none of these, but instead something completely different that we don't have conceptual framework to even imagine. If such civilization wanted to study Earth, wanted to understand our geological and atmospheric processes, wanted to test how our systems respond to perturbations, they might send probes that don't just observe passively, but that interact actively, that inject carefully calibrated disturbances and then measure how the disturbances propagate and amplify through Earth's complex nonlinear systems. From their perspective, it's science. Controlled experiments designed to build understanding of how planetary systems work. From our perspective, it's disasters, events that kill thousands or millions, and that we interpret as natural catastrophes because we don't recognize the artificial stimulus that triggered them. The ethical implications are staggering if this is what's happening. Would advanced civilization consider it acceptable to cause harm to emerging civilizations in the name of scientific research? Would they rationalize that the knowledge gained justifies the casualties? Would they even perceive us as worthy of moral consideration? Or would our technological primitiveness place us in the same ethical category where we place laboratory animals, useful for study, but not protected by the same moral frameworks that would prevent us from experimenting on fellow humans? Or perhaps the disasters aren't intentional. Perhaps they're side effects. Unintended consequences of whatever 3I Atlas is actually doing. If the object is probe or spacecraft operating according to physics we don't understand, if it's maintaining itself or collecting data, or communicating with home civilization through methods that manipulate fields or forces at scales we can't control, then those operations might create disturbances that propagate through Earth systems, even though causing those disturbances wasn't the intent. Like how human technology creates electromagnetic pollution that disrupts wildlife navigation, or how our industrial processes alter atmospheric chemistry in ways that change climate even though those weren't the purposes of the technology or the processes. The Voyager connection makes this even more ominous. Because if 3I Atlas has indeed changed trajectory to intercept Voyager, if an interstellar visitor is now heading toward our most distant spacecraft, the implications for what it might want are deeply troubling. Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 are humanity's ambassadors to the cosmos. Launched in 1977 to explore the outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Both spacecraft completed their primary missions and then continued outward, becoming the first human-made objects to enter interstellar space. Voyager 1 crossed the heliopause in 2012. Voyager 2 followed in 2018. They're now traveling through the interstellar medium, carrying golden records with sounds and images from Earth, messages intended for any intelligence that might encounter them. If 3i Atlas is heading toward Voyager, several possibilities present themselves. First possibility, curiosity. The object detected Voyager's transmissions or thermal signature, or some other indication of artificial presence, and altered course to investigate. This suggests 3i Atlas has propulsion capability, has sensors capable of detecting spacecraft at interstellar distances, and has either autonomous decision-making or is receiving instructions from home civilization that can communicate across light years rapidly enough to guide trajectory adjustments, all of which would definitively prove artificial origin rather than natural comet. Second possibility, communication. Perhaps 3i Atlas wants to examine Voyager's technology as a way of understanding human capabilities without approaching Earth directly. Perhaps intercepting our distant probe is less threatening, provides information about our technological level without requiring close encounter that might be dangerous for either side. Perhaps the Golden Record's invitation, its deliberate message saying, "We're here and we want to make contact," is being answered but in a way we didn't anticipate, through a meeting in deep space rather than at Earth. Third possibility, something more sinister. Perhaps 3i Atlas wants to ensure Voyager doesn't reach other civilizations. Perhaps our probe carrying information about Earth's location and about human biology and culture is seen as threat by intelligence that doesn't want us making contact with others, or that doesn't want information about humanity spreading through the galaxy. Perhaps intercepting Voyager is preventive action. This interpretation makes the earlier Voyager anomaly, the antenna orientation change, the random numbers transmission, more ominous. Perhaps that wasn't malfunction, but was first contact attempt, or was infiltration attempt, or was reconnaissance gathering data that informed the decision to intercept the spacecraft. The fact that NASA fixed Voyager's orientation without publicly explaining what caused the anomaly is suspicious to conspiracy theorists. Was it really just aging hardware failing in predictable ways? Or was something else happening that NASA recognized but chose not to disclose because acknowledging it would confirm artificial external interaction? The space agency has legitimate reasons for maintaining ambiguity. If they don't understand what happened, saying so publicly creates panic without providing useful information. If they do understand, and it suggests contact with external intelligence, revealing that prematurely without complete analysis and without coordination with other governments and institutions could create global chaos. But the ambiguity feeds speculation, feeds theories that agencies are hiding evidence, feeds claims like the one in the viral post suggesting that space agencies are secretly communicating with 3i Atlas. And while most such claims are baseless, the underlying question is legitimate. If contact with artificial interstellar intelligence were occurring, how would we know? Would agencies tell us? Under what circumstances would they maintain secrecy versus choosing disclosure? What protocols exist for managing such information? The answer is, protocols do exist, but they're inadequate. The SETI post-detection protocol outlines steps that should occur if alien signals are detected, including verification, notification of international bodies, and eventually public disclosure. But these protocols were written assuming detection of radio signals from distant civilizations, not physical objects entering our solar system, and they're guidelines, not laws, not enforceable agreements, just recommendations that institutions are free to ignore if they decide circumstances warrant secrecy. Different nations have different policies, different space agencies have different cultures around transparency. What NASA might disclose, Roscosmos might classify. What ESA might announce, CNSA might deny. And if one agency detects something that others don't, or if all agencies detect something but disagree about interpretation or about appropriate response, the result could be fragmented, confused public communication, where we're receiving contradictory information from different sources and where determining truth becomes nearly impossible. The claim about Japanese Space Agency, JAXA, receiving signals from 3i Atlas specifically, is interesting because JAXA operates several deep space missions and has sensitive receivers that could potentially detect transmissions that other agencies miss. But no official confirmation exists, no published papers, no press releases, just internet rumours and anonymous claims that can't be verified, which is exactly how legitimate information would begin circulating if someone inside an agency leaked classified data they believed public deserved to know. But also exactly how fabricated stories spread when people want attention or want to push particular narratives, So how do we evaluate such claims? We look for corroboration. We look for multiple independent sources. We look for documentary evidence. We look for logical consistency. And we maintain appropriate skepticism while remaining open to genuine revelations. The challenge is distinguishing between signal and noise when both can look superficially similar, when both spread through same social media channels, when both tap into same psychological tendency to see patterns and to believe dramatic claims. What we can say with certainty, what the observational data definitively supports, is that 3i Atlas exhibits behaviors that are difficult to explain through purely natural mechanisms. Let me walk through the specific anomalies one by one so you understand why researchers across multiple institutions are genuinely puzzled and why the artificial hypothesis, while extraordinary, keeps being proposed by credible scientists rather than just by fringe theorists. Because the evidence isn't ambiguous, the object is doing things that comets and asteroids don't typically do. And when conventional explanations struggle to account for observations, when you have to stack multiple unlikely circumstances on top of each other to maintain natural interpretation, the extraordinary alternative starts looking less extraordinary. First anomaly, the retrograde orbit. When 3i Atlas's trajectory was calculated in detail following its initial detection, astronomers discovered that while it's moving through the solar system roughly parallel to the plane where our planets orbit, the ecliptic plane that reflects how the solar system formed from a rotating disk of gas and dust, it's travelling in the opposite direction. This is what astronomers call a retrograde orbit, where the object moves clockwise when viewed from above the Sun's north pole, while the planets move counterclockwise. For objects that formed in our solar system, retrograde orbits are extremely rare. Most everything moves in the same direction because that's the direction the original protoplanetary disk was rotating. Interstellar objects can arrive from any direction with any orientation, so retrograde orbit by itself doesn't prove anything artificial. But combined with the fact that this retrograde trajectory is almost precisely aligned with the ecliptic plane, rather than arriving at some random angle, it raises questions. Because random approach from interstellar space should show random inclination relative to our planetary plane. The probability that a naturally occurring trajectory happens to align so closely with our ecliptic while moving backward is small. Not impossible, but small enough that it makes you wonder whether the alignment is deliberate. Whether something chose this trajectory specifically to enable efficient passage through the planetary system without gravitational perturbations from major planets deflecting it significantly. Think about what this trajectory accomplishes. By moving parallel to the planetary plane, 3i Atlas maximizes its time within the region where planets orbit and where observing Earth and other inner planets is optimal. By moving retrograde, it ensures that encounters with planets are high-velocity flybys rather than slower approaches that might allow gravitational capture or collision. It's a trajectory that allows thorough observation of the inner solar system while minimizing risks and maintaining escape velocity. Exactly what you'd design if you were sending probe to study a planetary system and wanted to get good data without getting trapped or destroyed. Second anomaly, the speed. At 58 km per second when measured in the outer solar system at 4.5 astronomical units from the Sun, 3i Atlas is moving fast even by interstellar standards. Oumuamua was travelling at 87 km per second relative to the Sun, which was already considered unusual, but Oumuamua was much smaller, estimated at maybe a kilometre or less in its longest dimension. 3i Atlas is estimated at 10 kilometres in size, giving it potentially 1,000 times more mass. Accelerating that much larger mass to high velocity requires correspondingly more energy. Where did that energy come from? Natural explanations exist. Perhaps 3i Atlas was gravitationally slingshot from its home star system through multi-body interactions that amplified its velocity through energy transfer from orbital dynamics. Perhaps it was accelerated through supernova blast wave if its formation system's star went supernova, though surviving such explosion intact seems unlikely for icy body. Perhaps it passed through dense molecular clouds or near compact objects during its interstellar journey and gained velocity through gravitational assists, all possible. But all requiring specific circumstances that aren't common in the galaxy. Or perhaps it has propulsion. Perhaps the velocity we observe isn't purely gravitational legacy from its launch, billions of years ago, but is actively maintained or was recently boosted through thrust mechanisms we can't directly observe. If 3i Atlas is artificial, if it's spacecraft or probe, then 58 kilometers per second is well within technological plausibility for civilization that has mastered interstellar travel, is actually quite modest compared to velocities that advanced propulsion concepts like fusion rockets or antimatter drives could theoretically achieve. The question isn't whether such velocity is possible for spacecraft, but whether 3i Atlas is spacecraft or is natural object. Third anomaly, the rotation. Spectroscopic observations and light curve analysis show that 3i Atlas rotates with remarkable regularity. The periodic variations in brightness as different faces of the object reflect varying amounts of sunlight reveal rotation period that's stable across multiple observations, that doesn't show the chaotic tumbling that would be expected from irregular body that formed through random collisions and fragmentation. Instead, the rotation appears controlled, deliberate, as if the object was designed to spin at specific rate. Why would artificial object rotate? Several reasons. First, rotation creates artificial gravity through centrifugal effect for anything attached to or contained within the object. If 3i Atlas carries instruments or even biological entities that evolved under gravity, rotation would provide gravitational analog that prevents long-term health effects of weightlessness, and that allows normal operation of systems designed for gravitational environment. Second, rotation provides stabilization. Gyroscopic effects from rotating mass resist perturbations that would otherwise cause tumbling or orientation changes. Third, rotation can assist thermal management by ensuring all surfaces periodically face toward and away from the sun rather than having one face continuously heated and opposite face continuously frozen. All three benefits, artificial gravity, stabilization, thermal management, are exactly what spacecraft designers prioritize, and the rotation rate that observations suggest for 3i Atlas is consistent with generating partial artificial gravity, perhaps 0.1 to 0.3 times Earth gravity, through centrifugal effect at the object's surface. Too slow to provide Earth normal gravity without being implausibly large, too fast to be random coincidence for natural body, just right for designed spacecraft trying to balance artificial gravity with structural constraints. Fourth anomaly, the surface properties. When telescopes analyze the light reflected from 3i Atlas, the spectral characteristics and the photometric properties don't match typical cometary surfaces. Normal comets are rough, are covered with dust and regolith from billions of years of micrometeorite bombardment and from sublimation processes that leave behind non-volatile residue, have surfaces with albedo, reflectivity, that's typically very low, around 3 to 5%, because the dusty coating is dark, show irregular variations in brightness, because different surface regions have different compositions and different roughnesses. 3i Atlas shows smoother reflectance properties, more uniform brightness across rotation phases than would be expected from natural rough surface, spectral characteristics suggesting material that's either been processed or that isn't typical ice-dust mixture we see on solar system comets. Some observations describe the surface as appearing polished or coated, as if covered with layer that's more reflective and more uniform than natural weathered surface would produce. This is exactly what you'd expect from spacecraft hull designed to minimize thermal absorption, or to protect internal systems from radiation, or to serve as antenna or detector array, where surface properties are engineered, rather than being accidental products of formation processes. Could natural processes produce smooth, uniform surface? Possibly. If 3i Atlas spent its interstellar journey passing through regions where fine dust accumulated on its surface, and then was compressed and sintered through temperature cycling or radiation processing, you might get smoother surface than typical comet. But this requires specific environmental history that's not common for objects travelling through interstellar medium, which is mostly empty. More likely explanation, if surface really is smooth and uniform as observations suggest, is that it's manufactured surface rather than natural one. Fifth anomaly, the H2O emissions. When spectrographs detected water vapour in the coma surrounding 3i Atlas, initial reaction was that this confirms cometary nature. Ice sublimating as object approaches sun is exactly what comets do, but the details are problematic. The amount of H2O detected relative to object's size and solar distance is higher than sublimation models predict for natural ice undergoing solar heating at that distance. And the distribution of the emission, the spatial pattern of where the water vapour appears to be coming from, doesn't match what you'd expect from sublimation occurring across naturally rough rotating surface. Instead, it appears more localized, more concentrated in specific regions, as if emanating from discrete vents rather than from entire sunward hemisphere. This is when some researchers began suggesting that maybe the H2O isn't sublimated ice. Maybe it's exhaust. Chemical rockets using hydrogen and oxygen as propellants produce water vapor as combustion product. So do fuel cells that generate electricity through hydrogen-oxygen reaction. So do various other propulsion and power technologies that could plausibly be used by advanced spacecraft. If 3I Atlas is artificial, if it's maneuvering or powering systems through processes that produce water vapor, then detecting H2O in its vicinity is expected outcome rather than being evidence of natural ice. Can we distinguish between sublimated ice and exhaust? In principle, yes. The velocity distribution of molecules, the isotopic ratios, the presence of other species beyond just water, all provide clues about origin. But collecting that data requires close-range, high-resolution spectroscopy that we haven't yet achieved for 3I Atlas. From the distances and with the instruments that have observed it so far, we can detect that H2O is present, but can't definitively determine whether it came from ice or from propulsion. The ambiguity allows both interpretations to remain viable. Sixth anomaly, the trajectory changes. This is perhaps most compelling evidence for artificial nature. When 3I Atlas passed perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun, observers noticed that its post-perihelion trajectory didn't match predictions based on pre-perihelion observations. The object executed what appears to be course correction, changed its velocity and direction in ways that gravitational interactions with Sun and planets don't account for. The delta V, the change in velocity, was small in absolute terms but was definitely present and was definitely non-gravitational. Natural comets show non-gravitational accelerations too. Outgassing, the rocket effect from sublimated ice escaping preferentially from one side of nucleus, can create thrust that alters trajectory. But the non-gravitational acceleration typically correlates with solar distance in predictable ways. Being strongest near perihelion when sublimation is most intense and decreasing, as object moves away from Sun, and it typically causes gradual changes that build up over time rather than sudden discrete maneuvers. 3I Atlas's trajectory change appeared more discrete, more controlled, occurring at specific time rather than being continuous gradual process, and the direction of the change is what makes it most suspicious. Rather than being random consequence of asymmetric outgassing pointing in whatever direction the most active vents happen to face, the velocity change pointed in direction that altered 3I Atlas's trajectory toward specific target, toward the region of space where Voyager spacecraft are traveling. This is the observation that transformed 3I Atlas from weird comet into possible artificial probe in many researchers' minds. Because trajectories toward specific destinations don't occur through natural processes, only deliberate navigation produces such behavior. Could this be coincidence? Could random outgassing have happened to produce thrust in exactly the direction needed to set up Voyager intercept trajectory? The probability is extremely low. You'd need the active vents to be located at precisely correct positions on nucleus, and to activate at precisely correct time, and to produce precisely correct thrust magnitude and duration. Stacking that many coincidences strains credulity. More parsimonious explanation is that the trajectory change was deliberate. That 3I Atlas detected Voyager and altered course to intercept, which definitively proves artificial nature and propulsion capability. Of course, NASA and other space agencies haven't officially confirmed that 3I Atlas is heading toward Voyager, haven't released the detailed trajectory calculations that would allow independent researchers to verify the intercept prediction, haven't commented publicly on the implications if intercept occurs. The silence could mean calculations don't actually show intercept, and the viral claims are based on misunderstanding or misinformation, or could mean agencies recognize the implications are too significant to announce without careful preparation and coordination. Without knowing which interpretation is correct, we're left with uncertainty that breeds speculation. What we do know is that Voyager 1 experienced unexplained anomalies in 2022. The Attitude Articulation and Control System, AACS, which controls spacecraft orientation and keeps antenna pointed at Earth, began sending invalid telemetry. The data didn't reflect any possible state the ACS could actually be in. It was nonsensical. random numbers rather than meaningful status information. Yet Voyager continued functioning normally otherwise, continued receiving commands, continued collecting science data, just wasn't reporting its orientation correctly. NASA's engineers spent months troubleshooting, eventually identified that problem was in AX memory corruption, either from radiation damage after 45 years in space, or from some other degradation mechanism, or from something else that they never fully explained publicly. They implemented workaround by switching to redundant systems and by modifying software to compensate for the corruption. Voyager resumed sending valid telemetry and mission continued, problem solved. Except that explanation doesn't fully satisfy everyone, because memory corruption from radiation should affect multiple systems randomly, rather than creating specific pattern that targeted only AACS telemetry while leaving everything else functioning perfectly. And because the timing, occurring when 3I Atlas was approaching inner solar system, suggests possible connection, even though mechanism for how interstellar object could affect spacecraft at that distance isn't obvious, and because Voyager's sudden orientation change, its antenna pointing away from Earth toward region where no known objects of interest exist, resembles exactly what you'd expect if external intelligence was attempting to communicate and was redirecting antenna to facilitate that communication. The official explanation might be completely correct. Might be normal aging spacecraft failure with no connection to 3I Atlas, but the alternative explanation, that Voyager was briefly accessed by external intelligence, that the random numbers were actually data encoded in format we don't recognize, that the antenna reorientation was preparing for communication with approaching visitor, is at least plausible enough that dismissing it entirely seems premature, given what we now know about 3I Atlas's anomalous properties and apparent trajectory toward Voyager's location. If contact occurred, if external intelligence successfully interacted with Voyager even briefly, what would that mean? First, it would prove that 3I Atlas, or something associated with it, can detect and interact with human technology across interplanetary distances, can identify our spacecraft among the background of natural objects, can penetrate our cybersecurity, such as it is, on hardware designed in 1970s without modern encryption or authentication, can send commands or data that our systems respond to, even though they weren't designed to interface with alien protocols. Second, it would prove that whoever controls 3I Atlas is interested in our technology, wants to understand our capabilities, is gathering intelligence about human spaceflight and about what we've achieved and about what messages we're sending into the galaxy via Voyager's golden record. This could be purely scientific curiosity from species that encounters many emerging civilizations and wants to catalogue them, or could be strategic assessment from species that perceives potential threat from human expansion and wants to understand how much of a threat we represent, or could be something else entirely that our limited perspective doesn't anticipate. Third, it would establish that the intercept trajectory isn't just heading toward region where Voyager happens to be, but is actively pursuing the spacecraft. If 3I Atlas accessed Voyager in 2022, when it was still in the inner solar system, detected the spacecraft's position and trajectory through that interaction, and then used that information to calculate intercept course following perihelion passage, we're witnessing strategic behavior, planning, multi-step mission execution where reconnaissance phase informs navigation phase, exactly what military reconnaissance missions do, exactly what you'd see if advanced civilization was carefully investigating our capabilities before deciding how to interact with us more directly. The implications cascade from there. If 3I Atlas can access Voyager, can it access other spacecraft? Can it interact with satellites orbiting Earth? Can it penetrate ground-based computer networks through signals transmitted via space infrastructure? Our entire technological civilization is increasingly dependent on systems that communicate wirelessly and that are networked globally. If external intelligence has capability to infiltrate those systems, to insert commands or extract data without our detecting the intrusion, what stops them from accessing any information they want? What prevents them from manipulating systems to produce outcomes they desire? The cybersecurity vulnerabilities are profound. Most space systems, most critical infrastructure systems, most military systems were designed under assumption that only human actors with limited capabilities would attempt intrusion. Were built to resist human hacking techniques. were secured against threats that emerged from terrestrial technological context, where certain assumptions about physics and about computational power and about communication methods hold. But if you're dealing with civilization that has billions of years of technological development beyond ours, that operates according to physics understanding that makes our best theories look like simplified approximations, that has computational resources that dwarf anything we can build, all of our security assumptions become invalid. They wouldn't need to brute force encryption through trying every possible key. They'd either have quantum computers or something beyond quantum that makes brute forcing trivial, or they'd have discovered mathematical vulnerabilities in encryption algorithms that we haven't found, or they'd access systems through side channels that we don't even recognize exist, because we don't understand the full physical principles their technology exploits. Our best security might be completely transparent to them, might not even slow them down, might be like ancient stone walls trying to defend against modern military. Historically interesting, but practically irrelevant. This is assuming they're interested in infiltrating our systems. Assuming they perceive value in accessing human information or in manipulating human technology. That assumption might be wrong. Civilization billions of years advanced might view our technology the way we view stone tools used by early hominids, interesting from anthropological perspective, but not particularly useful or threatening. They might not care about accessing our systems, because there's nothing in those systems that they need or want. The information we've accumulated might be trivial compared to what they already know. The capabilities our systems provide might be primitive compared to what they can do directly, without needing our infrastructure. But they might care about understanding us, about modeling our behavior, about predicting what we'll do as we continue developing technologically. Because even if we're currently irrelevant to them, we might not remain irrelevant forever. If human civilization survives its current challenges, if we navigate through the existential risks that could terminate us in the next few centuries, we eventually develop capabilities that start approaching what advanced civilizations possess, eventually become actors in galactic context rather than being confined to single planet, eventually matter to whatever communities or conflicts or arrangements exist among the ancient civilizations that have already spread throughout the galaxy. So studying us now, while we're still primitive and manageable, while we don't yet have capability to threaten or resist them, might be strategic planning, might be early assessment of what kind of civilization we'll become if we survive. Whether we'll be cooperative or aggressive, whether we'll respect other species or seek to dominate, whether we can be trusted or need to be contained. All questions that long-range strategic thinking would prioritize, all questions that objects like 3i Atlas, sent to observe and interact with emerging civilizations, would be tasked with answering. The disaster patterns fit this interpretation uncomfortably well. If you're advanced civilization trying to understand how resilient human systems are, how we respond to crises, how our institutions function under stress, what better way to gather that information than by inducing stresses and observing responses? You wouldn't cause disasters randomly, would carefully calibrate them to test specific aspects of human civilization. Earthquakes test physical infrastructure resilience and disaster response capabilities. Tsunamis test warning systems and evacuation procedures. Climate extremes test food production and resource distribution. Each disaster type reveals different information about human capacities and vulnerabilities. From advanced civilization's perspective, this might be completely ethical behavior. We perform experiments on laboratory animals to understand biological processes. We stress test materials and structures to determine failure points. We simulate disasters to prepare response plans. All accepted practices that serve legitimate purposes. Advanced civilization might view humanity similarly, a system to be studied through controlled perturbations that reveal its properties. The fact that those perturbations cause suffering and death might not register as ethical concern if they don't perceive us as moral peers, or might register as regrettable necessity justified by knowledge gained. Or I might be completely wrong about all of this. Might be seeing patterns that aren't there. Might be committing the classic fallacy of connecting unrelated events and attributing them to single cause when actually they're independent phenomena with separate explanations. The disasters might be purely natural, driven by tectonic and atmospheric processes that operate according to well-understood physics without requiring any external influence. The interstellar visitors might be purely natural objects whose unusual properties result from formation conditions and travel histories that we don't yet fully understand, but that don't involve intelligence or design. The coincidences of timing might be just that, coincidences that seem meaningful because human psychology is predisposed to see agency and intention even in random patterns. Distinguishing between these possibilities requires more data, requires observations that can definitively test whether 3i Atlas exhibits capabilities that natural objects don't possess, whether it's emitting signals that artificial transmitters produce, whether its trajectory changes show precision that navigation systems achieve, whether its surface properties and internal structure reveal engineering rather than natural formation, whether the disasters correlate with 3i Atlas in ways that statistical analysis confirms are beyond what chance would produce, all testable questions, all answerable through properly designed observations and analyses, all requiring that scientific community takes the artificial hypothesis seriously enough to conduct the tests, rather than dismissing the possibility a priori. Some researchers are doing exactly that, are designing observation campaigns specifically to test artificial versus natural hypotheses, are looking for electromagnetic emissions at frequencies that technology produces, are monitoring for trajectory changes that would indicate active propulsion, are analysing surface spectroscopy for materials that biological or geological processes don't create, are building statistical models that quantify disaster correlations accounting for all relevant confounding factors, are treating the question as legitimate scientific inquiry rather than as fringe speculation. But they're facing obstacles. Telescope time is competitive. Proposals to study possible alien probe face skepticism from review committees that prioritise conventional research. Funding agencies hesitate to support projects that might yield null results or that might be perceived as encouraging pseudoscience. Publishing results is difficult when journals prefer definitive conclusions over ambiguous findings. Careers suffer when researchers become associated with controversial topics that mainstream science views skeptically. All the institutional pressures that prevent scientific establishment from seriously investigating unconventional hypotheses operate to marginalize 3i Atlas research. This is precisely the environment where important discoveries get delayed or missed entirely, where evidence accumulates slowly because the people who could gather it most effectively are discouraged from doing so, where by the time consensus shifts and resources get allocated appropriately, the object has moved beyond observational range or the opportunity for critical measurements has passed. We've seen this pattern before with ball lightning, with continental drift, with existence of meteorites, phenomena that witnesses reported and that minority of researchers took seriously, but that mainstream science rejected until overwhelming evidence forced acceptance. The difference with 3i Atlas is the stakes. If it's natural object and we treat it as potential alien probe, worst case is we waste some resources on unnecessary observations and look foolish for overreacting to comet. If it's artificial probe and we treat it as natural object, worst case is we miss first contact opportunity and fail to gather intelligence about civilization that's observing us and potentially influencing our planet. The asymmetry of consequences argues for taking the artificial hypothesis seriously, even if probability is low. Better to be wrong in the direction of overestimating significance than wrong in the direction of underestimating it when what's at stake is understanding humanity's position relative to potentially much more powerful entities. The WOW signal connection adds another dimension to this. Because if radio observatories are genuinely detecting 1420 MHz signals from 3i Atlas, matching the frequency and characteristics of the famous WOW signal detected in 1977, that would be extraordinary evidence supporting artificial origin. The WOW signal was 72-second radio burst detected by Ohio State University's Big Ear telescope on August 15, 1977. The signal was strong, showed intensity dramatically above background noise, was narrow-band, concentrated at specific frequency rather than being spread across spectrum as natural sources typically are, and was precisely at 1420 MHz, the emission frequency of neutral hydrogen, which is universally present throughout the galaxy, and which is often proposed as logical frequency for interstellar communication, because any technological civilization will know about it. The astronomer monitoring the data printout circled the signal intensity readings and wrote "WOW" in the margin, giving the signal its name. Despite decades of follow-up searches, the signal was never detected again. Various natural explanations have been proposed: reflection of space debris, satellite interference, terrestrial radio source, but none definitively account for all the signal's characteristics. It remains one of the best candidates for possible artificial extraterrestrial transmission ever detected. If 3i Atlas is transmitting at same frequency, if multiple observatories are confirming the detection, if the signal characteristics match the original WOW signal, then we have to seriously consider that both detections are from same source, that whatever transmitted in 1977 is back, that it wasn't one-time random event but is repeating pattern, that 3i Atlas might be the transmitter, that it was in our vicinity in 1977, transmitted the WOW signal then, left the solar system, and has now returned, or that it's part of a network of similar objects that periodically pass through our region, and that all transmit at this characteristic frequency to announce their presence or to communicate with each other or to serve some function we don't understand. But I need to be careful here. The claims about 3i Atlas transmitting at 1420 MHz come from internet sources that I can't fully verify. I haven't seen published papers from FAST or from Allen Telescope Array or from other major facilities confirming such detection. Doesn't mean detection didn't occur, could be data is still being analysed or results are preliminary or observations are classified. But also means I can't treat this as established fact the way I can treat the trajectory and rotation and surface properties that multiple independent sources have documented. This is the challenge with topics like this. Separating verified observations from plausible speculation, from unverified claims, from deliberate misinformation, all of it circulates through same channels, all of it gets discussed in same forums, all of it influences how people think about the topic, but not all of it has equal evidentiary status. And maintaining intellectual integrity requires acknowledging when I'm discussing confirmed data versus when I'm discussing claims that need verification versus when I'm discussing speculation about what confirmed data might mean. What I can say with confidence is that whether or not 3i Atlas is transmitting at 1420 MHz, the coincidence of characteristics, large interstellar visitor, anomalous behaviours suggesting possible artificial origin, timing correlating with disaster patterns, trajectory toward Voyager, creates cluster of evidence that deserves serious investigation rather than dismissive skepticism. Each individual anomaly might have natural explanation, but when you have 6 or 7 anomalies all present in single object, when the probability of each individually is small and the probability of all occurring together is the product of those individual probabilities, natural explanation becomes increasingly strained while artificial explanation becomes increasingly parsimonious. This is Bayesian reasoning. You start with prior probability, your initial belief about how likely it is that artificial interstellar probes exist and visit our solar system. For most people, that prior is low because we've never definitively detected such probes before. Then you update based on evidence. Each anomaly that's better explained by artificial hypothesis than by natural hypothesis increases the posterior probability that 3i Atlas is artificial. How much it increases depends on how much better artificial explanation fits compared to natural explanation. The likelihood ratio. If anomalies are minor, if natural explanations are almost as good as artificial explanations, then likelihood ratios are close to 1 and posterior probability doesn't increase much. But if anomalies are major, if natural explanations require stacking multiple unlikely circumstances, while artificial explanation accounts for everything straightforwardly, then likelihood ratios are large and posterior probability increases dramatically, even if you started with low prior. Where the posterior probability ends up depends on your priors and on how you evaluate the likelihood ratios. Reasonable people can disagree. Someone with very strong prior belief that artificial probes are extremely rare might maintain that natural explanations, however contrived, are still more likely than artificial explanation. Someone with weaker prior belief might conclude that evidence has shifted probability sufficiently that artificial explanation is now more likely than natural. Neither position is irrational, given uncertainty in both priors and likelihood ratios. But what's definitely irrational is ignoring the evidence entirely, is refusing to update beliefs based on observations, is maintaining that 3i Atlas is definitely natural object despite the accumulating anomalies, or maintaining that it's definitely artificial despite absence of smoking gun proof, rather than acknowledging genuine uncertainty and calling for observations that could resolve that uncertainty. That's ideological thinking rather than scientific thinking. That's committing to conclusion first and then filtering evidence to support that conclusion, rather than following evidence wherever it leads. So where does this leave us regarding the question of whether we should fear 3I Atlas? The answer depends on what it is and what it's doing. If it's a natural object, if the anomalies have prosaic explanations that we'll eventually discover, then we shouldn't fear it any more than we fear any other comet or asteroid passing through the solar system. It's interesting scientifically, it's worth studying. But it's not threat beyond the standard impact risk that all near-Earth objects present. And 3I Atlas's trajectory doesn't bring it close enough to Earth for impact to be plausible even if trajectory changed substantially. If its artificial probe sent by ancient civilization to observe emerging species, if its reconnaissance platform gathering data about humanity and our planet, then fear might or might not be appropriate depending on the civilization's intentions. If they're simply curious, if they're conducting academic study of how life and intelligence evolve throughout the galaxy, if they have no intentions of interfering with our development, then 3I Atlas represents opportunity rather than threat. Represents chance to learn that we're not alone, to understand that universe is populated with others who have achieved what we're attempting. To gain perspective on our own development by seeing where it might lead if we survive long enough. But if the disasters are indeed being induced rather than being coincidental, if advanced civilization is treating Earth as an experimental system where they introduce perturbations to study our responses, if they're willing to cause suffering and death in service of their research goals, then fear is entirely appropriate. Then we're dealing with intelligence that doesn't recognize our moral status, that sees us as objects of study rather than as peers deserving respect. That might casually destroy our civilization if doing so serves their purposes, or if we become inconvenient or threatening to their interests. And if 3I Atlas is heading toward Voyager with hostile intent, if the goal is to intercept and destroy or capture our probe before it reaches other civilizations, then we're dealing with intelligence that perceives humanity as threat worth containing. That doesn't want us making contact with others. That wants to control information about our existence and our capabilities. That sees our expansion beyond Earth as something to be prevented rather than encouraged. That level of active opposition, even if not directed at Earth immediately, suggests that eventually they might take more direct action to ensure we don't become problem for them. The uncertainty is what makes this situation so psychologically difficult. We don't know what 3I Atlas is. We don't know what it's doing. We don't know what the intentions are of whoever or whatever sent it, if it is indeed artificial. We're making decisions about how to respond, whether to observe more carefully, whether to attempt communication, whether to prepare defenses, whether to do nothing and hope it passes without incident, without having the information we'd need to make those decisions optimally. We're flying blind through situation that might be benign or might be existentially dangerous, and the actions we take based on incomplete information might themselves influence the outcome in ways we can't predict. This is the quintessential challenge of contact with unknown intelligence. Every science fiction treatment of first contact confronts this uncertainty. Some imagine benevolent advanced civilizations that guide and protect emerging species. Some imagine hostile invaders that view other civilizations as resources to be exploited or threats to be eliminated. Some imagine indifferent entities that neither help nor harm but simply coexist without concerning themselves with lesser species. All are logically possible, none are certain. And which possibility best describes whatever intelligence might be behind 3I Atlas determines whether contact is humanity's greatest opportunity or its greatest threat. The Fermi paradox is relevant here. If the galaxy is old and vast, if life and intelligence emerge with any reasonable frequency, why don't we see obvious evidence of advanced civilizations? Why aren't the skies full of megastructures and communications and artifacts that unambiguously announce intelligence operating at scales that dwarf planetary civilization? Many solutions to this paradox have been proposed. Maybe life is rare, maybe intelligence is rare. Maybe technological civilizations are common, but self-destruct before achieving interstellar capabilities. Maybe they exist but hide deliberately. Maybe they exist and are obvious, but we haven't recognized their artifacts because we don't know what to look for. The dark forest hypothesis proposes a particularly grim solution. Civilizations hide because the galaxy is dangerous, because any civilization that announces its presence becomes target for older, more powerful civilizations that view all others as potential threats, and that preemptively eliminate any species that might eventually compete with them. In this scenario, the silence we observe isn't because civilizations are absent, but because they're all hiding. Because those who didn't hide were destroyed. Because survival requires remaining undetectable until you're powerful enough to defend yourself, and perhaps even then requires staying hidden, because you never know whether something even more powerful is lurking. If Dark Forest hypothesis is correct, then humanity has already made catastrophic mistake. Voyager's golden record advertises our existence. Our radio and television broadcasts have been propagating outward at speed of light for decades, announcing our presence to anyone within that expanding sphere who has receivers capable of detecting them. Our technological signatures, the atmospheric composition changes from industrial processes, the artificial light visible on Earth's night side, the radar emissions from military and civilian installations are detectable by sufficiently advanced sensors from interstellar distances. We're not hiding, we're broadcasting our presence loudly and continuously, and if that presence attracts predatory attention, we're defenseless. 3i Atlas might be that predatory attention arriving, might be first response to humanity's inadvertent announcement, scout probe sent to assess whether we're threat worth eliminating, or opportunity worth exploiting, or curiosity worth studying. Its behaviour over the coming months, whether it remains distant observer or approaches more closely, whether it continues toward Voyager or alters trajectory again, whether it transmits more overtly or maintains silence, will reveal its intentions, or at least constrain possibilities about what those intentions might be. But we might not have months. If 3i Atlas, or the civilization that sent it, decides to take action against Earth, the warning time could be minimal. Advanced propulsion could bring follow-up assets from wherever home civilization is located to Earth's vicinity in timeframes that our current models don't constrain. Weapons operating on physical principles we don't understand could strike without warning that our detection systems would recognize. We're vulnerable in ways that we can't even fully characterize because we don't know what capabilities exist at higher technological levels. This vulnerability is inherent to being emerging civilization. You can't defend against threats you can't detect, can't prepare for attacks using methods you don't understand, can't negotiate or deter when the power asymmetry is vast. The only defences available are those that work regardless of specifics. Dispersion, spreading humanity across multiple locations so single attack can't eliminate us. Resilience, building systems that can survive and recover from major disruptions, rapid development, advancing our capabilities as quickly as possible to reduce the technology gap, and appealing to whatever ethics or strategic calculations might discourage advanced civilizations from destroying emerging ones. Dispersion is the most robust defense but also most difficult to achieve quickly. Requires establishing self-sustaining human presence beyond Earth, on Moon, on Mars, in orbital habitats, eventually in other star systems. Requires decades or centuries of effort under best circumstances. Provides real security only once colonies are sufficiently developed that they can survive independently if Earth is destroyed. We're nowhere near that threshold currently. Humanity is essentially single-planet species with fragile off-world outposts that depend completely on Earth for supplies and support. Losing Earth means losing everything. Resilience is more achievable near-term but provides less complete protection. Building infrastructure that can withstand disasters, stockpiling resources, distributing critical knowledge and capabilities so that losing any particular location doesn't mean losing essential capacities. Developing early warning systems and response protocols, all valuable for natural disasters and human-caused catastrophes, regardless of whether alien threat materializes. All increase probability that civilization survives whatever comes. But ultimately, resilience on single planet has limits against adversaries who can affect entire planets. Rapid technological development is double-edged. Advancing our capabilities might enable defenses or deterrents that currently don't exist. Might reduce the technology gap to a point where we're not completely helpless. Might even enable us to become threat ourselves if that threat status paradoxically makes us safer by making our destruction costly enough that others choose to accommodate us rather than attack. But rapid development also accelerates risks from technologies we don't fully control. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, nanotechnology, geoengineering, all of which could cause self-inflicted catastrophe if deployed prematurely. Racing to develop without adequate safety measures might kill us faster than external threats would. Appealing to alien ethics or strategic interests is uncertain at best. We don't know what moral frameworks advanced civilizations operate under. Don't know whether they'd consider destroying emerging species to be ethical violation or just practical necessity. Don't know what strategic calculations they make about potential threats versus potential allies versus potential resources. We can argue that humanity has value, that we're interesting, that we're fellow conscious beings deserving moral consideration, that we might contribute unique perspectives or capabilities to galactic community, but we don't know whether such arguments matter to intelligences that have existed for eons and that have likely heard similar arguments from countless other emerging species, some of which survived and some of which didn't. What we can do is continue observing, continue gathering data about 3i Atlas and about whatever else might be happening in our solar system that we haven't detected yet. Continue building the technological and institutional capabilities that make us more resilient and less vulnerable, regardless of what threats we face. Continue debating publicly about how humanity should respond to evidence of external intelligence if that evidence becomes undeniable. Continue building international cooperation and global governance capabilities that enable coordinated response rather than fragmented reactions if crisis occurs, and we can remain intellectually honest about what we know versus what we're speculating about. Can acknowledge that 3i Atlas is genuinely anomalous without claiming certainty about what those anomalies mean. Can take seriously the possibility that we're being observed by advanced civilization without assuming that such observation is necessarily hostile. Can prepare for potential threats without becoming paranoid or paralyzed. Can balance healthy skepticism about extraordinary claims with appropriate openness to evidence that our assumptions about humanity's cosmic situation might be wrong. Because here's what I think is most important for you to understand as we approach the end of this investigation. Whether 3i Atlas is natural object or artificial probe, whether it's connected to Earth's disasters or that's coincidence, whether it's heading toward Voyager or that's misinterpretation of trajectory data, the fundamental reality is that humanity is not prepared for contact with advanced intelligence. We don't have institutions designed for managing such contact. Don't have protocols that have been tested and refined. Don't have global consensus about what our goals and values would be in such scenario. Don't have technological capabilities that would enable meaningful negotiation from a position of anything other than profound weakness. This unpreparedness is dangerous, means that if contact occurs, our response will be improvised, will be influenced by whoever happens to be making decisions at that moment based on their particular interests and values and constraints, rather than being based on carefully considered humanity-wide consensus. Will likely be fragmented as different nations and institutions pursue conflicting strategies. Will probably include significant fraction of population denying that contact is occurring or insisting that evidence is fabricated or is being misinterpreted. All recipes for suboptimal outcomes at best and catastrophic mistakes at worst. We should be preparing, should be having conversations about what contact scenarios are plausible and what responses would be appropriate for each. Should be developing international frameworks that enable coordinated rather than competitive responses. Should be building detection and monitoring capabilities that give us maximum warning time if something approaches Earth. Should be researching the technologies that would enable defense or deterrence if those become necessary. Should be spreading humanity beyond Earth so we're not single-point failure. Should be doing all of this regardless of whether 3i Atlas is threat or not, because even if this visitor is benign, there will be others. The galaxy is large. The timescales are vast. Eventually we will encounter something. Better to be prepared. But preparation requires facing the possibility that we might be wrong about our cosmic significance, that we might not be alone, that we might not be safe, that the universe might contain intelligences vastly more powerful than us, who might not have our best interests in mind. Those are uncomfortable truths to confront. Easier to believe that we're alone, that space is empty, that we can develop at our own pace without external pressures, that we control our own destiny completely. Easier but potentially fatally naive if those beliefs are wrong. 3i Atlas is forcing this confrontation whether we're ready or not, through its anomalous properties, through its potential connection to disasters, through its apparent trajectory toward Voyager, through the mere fact of being third confirmed interstellar object in less than a decade, suggesting these visitors are common rather than rare. All pushing us to ask questions we've been avoiding, all demanding responses we're not prepared to give, all revealing how vulnerable we are and how little we actually understand about the cosmic environment we inhabit. So what should you do with this information? First, stay informed. Follow the observations. Pay attention to what happens with 3i Atlas over coming weeks and months. Watch whether trajectory change toward Voyager is confirmed or refuted. Monitor whether disasters continue correlating with the object's position, or whether pattern breaks down. Notice whether radio detections are validated or debunked. Don't accept any single source as authoritative. Compare multiple sources. Look for corroboration. Think critically about what claims are supported by evidence versus what's speculation. Second, pressure institutions to take this seriously. Contact elected representatives. Support organizations working on planetary defense and on SETI. Demand transparency about what space agencies know and what they're observing. Push for international cooperation on contact protocols. Advocate for resources being allocated to building capabilities we need, regardless of whether specific threats materialize. Democratic societies respond to public pressure. If enough people indicate that preparation for contact scenarios is priority, institutions will respond by making it priority. Third, prepare yourself and your communities for potential disruptions. Build resilience at local level. Develop skills and relationships and resource reserves that enable surviving through crises. Don't become survivalist paranoid about imminent catastrophe, but don't remain complacently dependent on systems that might not be as stable as they seem. Balance between the extremes. Recognize that whether threats come from alien intelligence, or from climate change, or from political instability, or from any of the many challenges humanity faces, resilience is valuable regardless. Fourth, think seriously about what values humanity should represent if we're being observed or evaluated. Because if advanced civilizations are watching us, judging whether we're worthy of protection or interaction, or just whether we're a threat worth worrying about, then our collective behavior matters. How we treat each other, how we treat other species, how we handle power and technology, how we respond to challenges, all of that is data that observers could use to predict what kind of interstellar civilization we'd become if we survive long enough to leave our planet. We might not be able to control whether external intelligences exist or what they decide about us, but we can control what we actually are, what values we embody, what trajectory we're on. And if those factors influence whether we receive help when we need it, as some interpretations of 3i Atlas suggest might be the case, then becoming worth helping is within our power even if ensuring help arrives isn't. Now, I want to know from you, what do you think about all this? Are these interstellar bodies that are suddenly arriving in our solar system, objects like 3i Atlas, really alien spacecraft? Or are they just ordinary celestial objects that we're misinterpreting because we're predisposed to see patterns and agency, even in random events? Do you believe that disaster correlations are real connections or just coincidences that seem meaningful because we're paying attention? Do you think space agencies are hiding evidence of contact, or are they being appropriately cautious about not promoting unverified claims? What should humanity's response be if 3i Atlas is confirmed to be artificial? Write your thoughts in the comments section below. I read all of them, and I value the diverse perspectives that this community brings, because ultimately, if we are facing contact scenario, it's not just scientists and government officials who need to understand what's happening. It's all of us. It's everyone who will be affected by decisions being made about how humanity engages with the cosmos. Your voice matters. Your perspective matters. And the conversation we have collectively about these questions might influence what happens next. I hope you found today's video valuable. If you did, please like it and share it with friends who would be interested in these questions. If you're new to this channel, subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss future episodes as we continue following this story and as new developments emerge. The investigation is ongoing, the observations are continuing, and what we learn over the coming weeks could reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd recommend checking out the next one where we discuss the mysterious sounds that a Chinese astronaut heard in space. Sounds like someone knocking on the spacecraft hull from outside. But who was knocking? How could such sounds come from space? The answers to those questions are fascinating and connect to broader patterns about what's happening in Earth's orbit and beyond. Very interesting content that you won't want to miss. I'll meet you in the next episode. Until then, take care. Stay curious. Keep watching the skies because they're definitely watching us. And remember that whether 3i Atlas represents threat or opportunity, or just scientific curiosity, The way we respond will reveal what kind of species we are, and what kind of future we might build if we're given the chance. The evidence is there, the patterns are there, the anomalies are undeniable, what they mean remains uncertain. But ignoring them, dismissing them without investigation, pretending that everything is normal when the observations clearly show something unusual is happening, that's not skepticism, that's denial. And denial doesn't protect us from threats or help us recognize opportunities. Only honest engagement with evidence, only willingness to update beliefs based on observations, only intellectual courage to consider uncomfortable possibilities gives us any chance of navigating successfully through whatever is actually happening. 3I Atlas is there, in our solar system, moving in ways that nature alone struggles to explain, potentially heading toward our most distant spacecraft, possibly connected to disasters affecting millions of people, definitely demanding our attention and our best efforts to understand. What we do with that knowledge, whether we rise to meet this challenge or whether we remain paralyzed by uncertainty or denial, will determine whether future generations remember this moment as humanity's awakening to cosmic reality, or as missed opportunity that we failed to recognize until it was too late. The choice, as always, is ours. But the clock is running. 3I Atlas isn't waiting for us to reach consensus before continuing whatever mission it's on. Events are unfolding whether we're ready or not. The universe doesn't care about our psychological comfort or our institutional inertia. It operates according to its own principles and its own timescales, and we either adapt to that reality, or we fail to survive long enough for our adaptation to matter. So pay attention, stay informed, think critically, demand transparency, build resilience, support preparation, contribute to conversations about how humanity should engage with cosmos. Be part of solution rather than remaining passive observer while others make decisions that affect everyone. This is moment that matters. This is test that we can't afford to fail. This is humanity's introduction to whatever else exists out there among the stars, and based on what 3I Atlas is showing us, whatever exists out there is vastly more advanced, possibly more numerous, definitely more mysterious than we imagined. Whether they're hostile or benevolent or indifferent remains to be determined, but that they exist, that they're here, that they're observing and possibly influencing us, is becoming harder to deny with each new observation and each new correlation and each new anomaly that emerges from the data. The age of cosmic isolation is ending. The comfortable belief that we're alone is becoming untenable. The naive assumption that we control our own destiny without external constraints is being challenged by evidence that something else is present, something else is active, something else might be making decisions about humanity's future that we're not even aware are being made. This is the reality that 3I Atlas represents. This is the wake-up call that the universe is delivering. This is the moment when everything changes if we're wise enough to recognize what's happening and brave enough to respond appropriately. I hope we are. I hope humanity demonstrates the wisdom and the courage and the unity that survival might require. Because the alternative, remaining divided, remaining unprepared, remaining in denial until whatever is going to happen has already happened, is too grim to contemplate. Thank you for watching. Thank you for engaging with these difficult questions. Thank you for being part of a community that refuses to look away from evidence just because implications are uncomfortable. Together we might figure this out. Together we might navigate successfully through whatever comes next. Together we might ensure that humanity's story continues far beyond this moment of cosmic contact and far into the future that we're fighting to preserve.